Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. Today, we continue from where we left off in last week's story, Welcome to Bedside Manor by GasStationJack. If you haven't seen part 1 through 3, or want to know where you can purchase more of Jack's stories, check the description below. Now, let's move on to part 4, 5, and 6 of Welcome to Bedside Manor. As is usually the case for situations like these, the person with the gun became the de facto man in charge. I will give him some credit. He started off okay. Our first course of action was a group field trip to the basement, where Tobias put in a call to the local authorities. We were informed that, owing to the storm and our remote location, it would take an hour before anyone could reach us. That's when Tobias's leadership skills took a steep nosedive. In the end, he stole Jerry's original plan and told everyone to go wait in their rooms until the authorities arrived. With the allegedly blind man now in the wind, I had slipped to the number 2 spot on the group's most likely to be the killer list. But that didn't mean that they were ready to line up and do trust falls with me. Tobias kept his gun in hand as he chauffeured us each to our own rooms, instructing everyone to lock their doors and stay put. As Jerry wandered the suite looking for the camera and microphone bugs, I sat at the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of everything. But this puzzle was missing too many pieces. How could someone have orchestrated something like this? Why would they? Who killed the old woman? What's going to happen next? Those particular mysteries were way too abstract for my brain to find any foothold. But I had no trouble with this one. Why does Tobias want us to stay in our rooms? It made no sense. Tobias had demonstrated a certain degree of intelligence that would lead me to assume he knew why separating into smaller, easier-to-target groups was a bad idea. We only needed to survive for 1 hour. Why wouldn't he want us to stay together? The answer came to me out of nowhere. He needed to get rid of us so he could use the phone without any witnesses. I couldn't explain how or why I knew, but I was certain this was the answer. Tobias had a secret. He was playing dumb, but he knew more than he was letting on, and he might not have been the only one. I suddenly remembered the note, the one Claire gave me shortly before the lights went out. I dug it out of my pocket, unfolded it, and read the message. "We are all going to die here tonight." Well, that is singularly unhelpful, I thought, crumpling the paper and tossing it into a trash can against the wall. Jerry fell onto the bed next to me with a defeated sigh. "I can't find the bugs anywhere, dude." "Jerry," I started. "You remember when we first left the car and I explicitly said, 'no weapons'?" "Yeah." "Is there any chance you completely ignored what I told you and smuggled one up here anyway?" He took a conspicuously sharp intake of breath and said, "What answer won't make you mad at me right now?" "Oh, thank God. Where is it?" Jerry rolled off of the bed and crawled into the bathroom. When he returned a moment later, he was holding his jeans. He dug into the pockets until he found a police-grade stun gun that he'd smuggled up here without my knowledge, then tossed it to me. I was both annoyed and relieved. At least now we could defend ourselves if we were lucky enough to see the trouble coming ahead of time. But trouble always had a way of sneaking up on Jack. I spun around to see what trouble had just snuck up on me. She was standing next to the bookcase, looking very different from how I first met her. She'd let her hair down and changed into a pair of jeans and a Nirvana t-shirt. If not for the black lipstick, I may not have recognized her right away. "Lauren?" I said, careful not to make any sudden moves. If she'd come here to kill me, it was awfully generous of her to give me a warning first. I didn't see any weapons in her hands this time, but I wasn't about to assume anything. "Hello there," Jerry said, as if this was a perfectly normal encounter. "I didn't think we'd have any company tonight. Quick question, are you the murderer?" She crossed her arms. "No, are you?" He turned to me and said, "I believe her. I don't know why, but I do." I couldn't hold the question in any longer. "How did you get in here?" "There's a secret passage behind our bookshelves connecting the two rooms," she explained, pointing at the new entryway exposed in our wall. "Must be a part of the murder mystery or whatever. You guys know this whole situation is totally screwed up, right?" I answered, "Yeah," as Jerry said, "Totally." She went on, "We're getting out of here. You boys want to come?" Jerry eagerly answered, "Always." But I wasn't so sure that I could trust anyone who trusted us. The only way she could possibly know that neither of us were the killer was if she already knew who the killer was, right? "Not so fast," I said. "What makes you so sure that you even want us to come with you?" "Claire trusts you. That's good enough for me." "But why does Claire trust us?" Lauren seemed confused. She tilted her head and said, "You do know what she is, right?" "What is she?" "You mean you don't already know?" "Can we just cut to the chase here? I'm so tired of beating around the bush." "Claire, she knows things she shouldn't know. Sometimes she remembers things before they happen and..." Lauren stopped, looking around the room. "And what?" "And she can tell when people are about to die." I thought about the note crumpled in the trash and asked a question I didn't know that I wanted the answer to. "Is she ever wrong?" "Well, she told me you were like her. Was she wrong about that?" "There's something messed up with me. I think that's what she meant. But we've already spent too long discussing it. As I'm sure you've gathered by now, we're being watched, which means they'll know any plan we come up with. Our best option is to work fast and stick together." "Agreed. Let's get going. Claire is waiting for us." I knew the clock was ticking. I didn't have time to second guess. Survival instincts had kicked in, and now we were making our escape. "Who the hell is Claire?" Jerry asked as we walked through the secret passageway. She was waiting for us at the end of the plain, dimly lit corridor connecting our two rooms. Claire held up Lauren's butterfly knife in her hand, fully extended, pointed at the floor. I instantly knew without asking her that she was afraid of knives. She hated touching them. The only reason she had this one was because Lauren insisted that she take it to arm herself moments ago, before heading through the secret passageway and leaving her alone and vulnerable. But did I know that because of the look on her face? Her body language? Or was there something else at play? Was something putting ideas into my head again? Damn, I really need to get my medicine before we leave. Claire smiled with her eyes when she saw us coming. I noticed that she had already changed clothes for the escape. A knee-length floral skirt and a black long-sleeve blouse that didn't quite match. Still, it would serve its purpose well enough if we needed to run. As we entered their room, I forgot what was going on and tried for mandatory pleasantries. "Claire, this is..." She cut me off. "Jerry, I know." Jerry smiled and whispered, "I'm famous." Lauren took her knife from Claire and asked, "Is it safe?" Claire shook her head. "I can't tell. There's something about this house. It's like trying to see through fog. All I know is what's right in front of me." Lauren looked at me. "How about you? Is it safe?" "How the hell would I know? I told you I'm not psychic." She sounded like she was running out of patience. Not psychic, just sensitive. Sometimes when people are close to death, they can hear something whispering from the other side. For whatever reason, Claire's talent has a certain effect on people like that. She's like a signal boost. A jolt of electricity ran up my spine, followed by a quick wave of nausea. The earth quaked. The house shook. I nearly lost my balance again, and in an instant, it was over. I reflexively reached up and grabbed my throat, right where the phantom pain was beginning to subside. "Did you guys feel that?" Sherry shrugged. "Feel what?" Claire was holding on to Lauren for balance, her head turned down as she took deep breaths. One of her hands was pressed against her throat. When she finally looked up, we shared the same thought. She let me be the one to say it. "Someone just died." "Oh, snap," Jerry said. "Jack's got the shining. Quick, what number am I thinking of?" Lauren quickly replied, "It doesn't work that way, you idiot." The number he was thinking of was 69. She turned her attention to her sister and asked, "What did you see?" "Nothing," she answered, "but I felt it." I looked at Jerry and gestured to the door. He didn't need to be a mind reader to know what I meant. Time to move. He led the way back into the hall. We followed. Down the first flight of stairs, the ground floor was already in sight. Then Lauren screamed. We saw a shadow of a crumpled heap at the landing on the second story, bleeding into the carpet. It was Hope's lifeless body. Her terror-stricken face drained of color. A kitchen knife protruded from the center of her throat. That must be why she didn't make a sound. The killer cut off her voice before she could alert anyone else. Smart, because a simple scream was all it took to bring the rest of the house running to meet us. Thanks a lot, Lauren. At this point, Bridget's scream just felt redundant. Tobias, predictably, pulled out his gun. "What happened?" he yelled. "Oh my God, oh my." Bridget went to check for a pulse, but it was nothing more than a formality. We could all see that she was done for. After a few seconds, Bridget looked up and shook her head. I considered signaling the others and making a break for the stairs, but Tobias's gun was seriously complicating our route of escape. "Somebody better start talking right now," he said. Jerry made a valiant attempt. "Hey, don't look at us. We were just hanging out upstairs together when this happened." "Why were you out of your rooms?" We were planning our escape. Don't worry, T-Bone, I was going to come back for you." That's when Lauren reminded me of the worst part of Hope's death. "Someone has to tell Wolfgang." "Tell me what?" I turned and saw the boy standing in the open doorway to his room. Lauren and Tobias moved fast, cutting off his line of sight. They talked over one another, speaking too quickly for me to understand either of them. Wolfgang walked towards me, pushed his way between two of them, approached the body of his dead mother, and looked down at where she lay in a pool of fresh blood. The others were too focused on finding the right words to say, or figuring out what was going on, or casting blame and doubt. They were all too distracted to notice what I noticed, the briefest flicker of a smile on Wolfgang's face. Part 5. Tobias took a knee and pulled the boy away from his mother's body. An awkward silence fell as we waited to hear what our honorary leader would possibly say. I didn't envy his position. I wouldn't have known how to talk to Wolfgang under the best of circumstances. I certainly couldn't process more than a superficial, "I'm sorry for your loss," if I had to. But Tobias wanted to be the one in charge, and that position came with certain burdens that guns simply could not help. Tobias did the best he could. "Wolfgang, listen, I need you to be strong, okay?" The kid seemed plenty strong to me, just a callous, empty, Okay. Followed by a long stare at his mother's body, and the words, I guess whoever killed the old woman got Mom too. Jerry was next to speak. I think it's high time we all get out of here. Tobias stood and turned to square off against him. Get out of here and go where? Anywhere, said Lauren, stepping up to Jerry's side. Pick a direction and go. There's a murderer in this house. It's better than sticking around and getting picked off one at a time. Nobody's going anywhere, Tobias said sternly. Jerry crossed his arms. It sounds an awful lot like you've got an ulterior motive to keep us in this place. Tobias was getting worked up now. If I was the killer, don't you think that I'd just have shot you by now and been done with it? Of course not, Jerry responded. The thrill is in the hunt. I punched him in the shoulder. All right, everybody, shut up, okay? Whoever's behind this was hoping for this exact scenario. I don't know how they did it, but I don't much care anymore. The important facts are these. We've all been lured into a trap. We're all being watched and toyed with. Nowhere else inside this house can be considered safe, and none of us can be trusted. The stupidest thing we can do is stay put. Wait a second, Tobias said. What do you mean by, we're being watched? Jerry and I have reason to believe our room is bugged. Tobias shifted his eyes to the body. So then there could be cameras. There might be footage of whoever killed... A jolt of energy shot through me fast and hard. I lost my breath and nearly lost my balance along with it. For a moment, I thought that I was having a heart attack, but then the moment passed, just as suddenly as it had come. Dude? Jerry put a hand on my shoulder. You alright? You look like you just swallowed a stink bug. Claire! Lauren caught her sister before she fell over. What's wrong? She struggled to catch her breath, then looked at me and answered without using her words. The killer knows we're figuring it out. He's panicked, he's changing plans, and someone is about to die. It wasn't just a suspicion or an intuition. It was a feeling of terror that you get half of a second before a car accident. When you see it coming, but you can't stop it. The moment when time slows down, when people see their lives flash before their eyes. It hadn't happened yet, but we were way too late to stop this. It was as good as done. Damn it! I screamed. Claire finally spoke. She said exactly what I knew she was going to say. I'm so sorry. The feeling was already wearing off. The sense of inevitability dwindled by the second, replaced with a newfound urge to get the heck out of there before what I saw came to pass. I chose my words carefully. We have to leave. Tobias raised his voice. I said we're not going anywhere until... I'd heard enough of him. Tobias wasn't the only one with a weapon. Before I'd even had time to think, I pulled the stun gun out of my pocket and hurled it as hard as I could. It struck him right between the eyes, dropping him onto his back. I screamed, immediately before realizing why I should not have done that. Dang, dude, Jerry said. Nice shot. Tobias was already getting back on his feet. He reached into his jacket, presumably going for the handgun, but then his face registered a look that I recognized all too well. Oh crap, look. That's when I knew. He doesn't have his pistol anymore. He looked around for his weapon, but his eyes settled on something else. Jerry! I screamed, pointing to where the stun gun had landed on the stairs. Tobias leapt for it. Jerry let out a battle cry of "Spring!" as he dove headfirst across the hall. They collided and tumbled down the stairs together. Lauren stepped forward, but I held my arm out to stop her. Wait, I said. For what? Until we see who gets the gun. They both took a hell of a beating on the way down. There was blood on both of their faces when they finally came to a rolling stop. Jerry kicked the stun gun across the floor. Tobias took the bait, leaping to his feet while Jerry grabbed his ankles and pulled them out from under him. Lauren asked. Shouldn't we? No, he's got this. I knew Jerry would either go for the weapon first, or Tobias would spend the only charge on the one guy here who had already tasered himself for fun on multiple occasions. They grappled clumsily across the floor until Jerry got the upper hand, snagged the weapon, and fired it into the air with a triumphant, "Ha!" Tobias immediately punched him square in the nose. Jerry dropped the gun, grabbing his bleeding face, and said, "Oh, screw you, you sore loser!" Lauren charged down the stairs with Claire tailing her. I kept close. When she hit the foot of the stairs, Lauren shouted, "That's enough!" Jerry pointed at Tobias. "He started it!" Lauren ignored him. "This isn't helping. Put your manly parts away and pay attention to what's happening before it's too late." Tobias wiped his bloody face onto his sleeve. He looked around at the crowd that had gathered on the first floor, then up the steps. "Bridget." His voice had lost all authority. Now it was replaced by simple, old-fashioned fear. "Honey, where are you?" I looked behind me. There was no one at the top of the stairs. A quick head count proved that we were suddenly missing 2 people. Bridget and Wolfgang were both lost, disappeared into the ether just like old Nathaniel, and, I just now noticed, Maggie. There was a bloody spot on the floor where she had died, but evidently someone had moved the body. I looked towards the front door. It was right there. We were almost free. Just a few steps and that unspeakable vision I saw on the top of the stairs wouldn't be possible. Tobias was already on his way up the stairs, though, calling his wife's name. The others shifted gears accordingly, only I stayed behind, by myself, wishing there was something I could do to change their minds. But Tobias wouldn't leave without his wife. Lauren wouldn't leave without the missing child. Claire wouldn't leave without her sister, and Jerry wouldn't leave until everyone else was safe. Nothing I could say would change it. That's why he was about to die. Click-clack. I looked to the bookcase, where that strange noise had come from. It was moving, pivoting on a hinge, swinging outward, creaking open like a door. Another secret passageway. I braced myself for the closet monster or swarm of killer hornets or whatever other surprise attack the night had in store, but nothing happened right away. The bookcase stopped moving when the passage was about a foot ajar, enough to see through, if I wanted to take a look. This was a new mystery beckoning me over. Luckily, I'd run out of intellectual curiosity several dead bodies ago, and I could see the obvious trap for what it was. After several seconds, I still hadn't moved. I guess that's when the obvious trap decided to up the ante. "Hello?" screamed the voice of Bridget from the other side of the secret door. "Is someone there? Please, help me." I approached the bookcase, leaned against it, and pushed it closed until I heard the latch snap into place. Bridget, or whatever was using her voice, continued to plead with me, but now it was muffled, barely audible. If we were lucky, nobody else would hear it. I turned to see Lauren standing at the foot of the stairs, Claire hiding right behind her. "Did you just close a secret door?" Lauren asked. I shook my head and said, "What secret door? No?" Bridget let out a loud scream. The pipes on this woman were impressive, to say the least. Lauren began approaching me, taking slow steps with Claire silently following. "What was that?" she asked. Click-clack. The bookcase door swung open again, with enough force to hit me in the back and knock me onto the ground, as books flew off of the shelf and landed around me. Bridget continued to scream. "Help me, please! My God, Tobias! Someone! Anyone!" "Oh," I said, feigning stupidity. "You meant that?" Lauren rushed over to the passageway, but I pulled myself up and blocked her path. I held out both hands and said, "Wait." She stopped long enough to put her knife against my throat and say, "Give me one reason why I should." "Earlier, when we found Hope's body, I saw something. I don't know what it is, and I don't know if you'd call it a vision, but..." I looked at Claire. "I know you saw it too." "What was it?" Lauren asked. I couldn't bring myself to describe the details. "This house is messing with us. There's no scenario where we all get out alive. It's like quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. The only winning move is not to play. And you're the one who gets to decide where we draw the line? Who is and isn't worth saving? You want to be in charge of the triage? What if it was me or Claire in that room? What if it was your friend Jerry? If you want to run away and save yourself, go for it. But don't you dare tell me who isn't worth my saving. Bridget! It all became moot anyway a second later when Tobias finally heard his wife's voice. He raced down the stairs, ran past us without even acknowledging our little standoff, and went into the secret room behind the bookshelf. Jerry slid down the handrail behind him, jumped off at the last second, and waved at us as he followed Tobias like a farm dog chasing the owner's car into traffic. I rolled my eyes and followed. Lauren and Claire were right behind us. The moment we were all together in the room, the secret bookcase door slammed shut behind us. It was a library, a secret room bigger than the parlor, with every square inch of wall covered by bookshelves and lit by a cluster of crystal chandeliers. Under other circumstances, I'd have been losing my mind in a good way, but despite the size of our new cage, I was feeling woefully claustrophobic. It certainly didn't help that Bridget was chained up to a wooden chair in the center of the room, with a square box in her lap that had a bright LED display counting down the timer from 56 minutes. It also didn't help us that the blind man had suddenly reappeared, standing in the room with us. Lauren tore the books from the secret door, throwing them to the ground in an effort to find a way to reopen it from this side. She wouldn't find it. I knew she was feeling regret, but I kept my I told you so's to myself for now. Tobias was at Bridget's side, comforting her while simultaneously checking the chains that held her in place. Bridget's mascara was running down her face. She was saying a lot of things, nothing terribly important. A lot of, "I love you, I don't want to die," and variations on that theme. Claire collected the books that Lauren tossed to the ground, moving them into a stack in the corner. Jerry circled the room, taking it all in. I just stood still, frozen, wondering if I could have tried harder to escape when we had the chance. When Nathaniel spoke, we all stopped what we were doing and listened. "It would appear that our dear Bridget has fallen victim to one of Bedside Manor's many perils. A most dangerous trap indeed, but not to worry. There is still time to solve this puzzle and save her life. To do so, we must work together and search for clues." Lauren charged at him. "Listen to me, you mysterious weirdo. Let us out right now or I'm going to cut you into confetti and throw a goddamn party." "I'm sorry," he responded a little too calmly. "I don't understand that reference. Perhaps if you search in the library, you'll find what you are looking for." She lunged forward with a scream and plunged the blade into his stomach. He didn't react. I nearly soiled myself, but the old man acted like he hadn't even noticed. Lauren yanked out the knife, slinging blood across the carpeted floor. Nathaniel waited for a moment, then said, "If you need a hint to get yourself started, or if you find that you've gotten stuck, I'm authorized to give you up to 3 clues to get you back on track, but all members of the party must agree before—" Lauren held the knife with both hands and slashed it across Nathaniel's face from ear to ear. Blood poured from the enormous gash. The flesh of his top lip dangled over his beard. His tongue moved up and down, visible from the tear in his cheek. And yet, it didn't seem to faze him one bit. His words were slightly harder to understand, but I think that he was explaining what we had to do to get another hint. Lauren backed away, a look of pure horror on her face. "What is going on?" she gasped. "Well, my theory of the sex cult just got shot right out the window," Jerry said, handing her a stack of oversized encyclopedias. That's when Bridget said something that caught my attention. Her voice changed. It was quieter now. This was meant to be for her husband and no one else. Of course I had to listen. "Tobias, my darling, I have to tell you something. I have to tell you. I know about Lisa." "Be quiet, dear." "That's what this is all about, right? That's why we're here, isn't it? That's the only thing that makes sense. This has to be something to do with... Bridget, not another word. I love you. I'm going to get us out of here. I just need to find some tools. Jerry walked up to them. What are we looking at? I'm a bit of a bomb guy myself. Tobias pushed him away. Not now, you. No offense, but this is way out of your league. I just need to find a way to open the faceplate. Jerry removed his belt and held it over. Here, you can use the belt prong to pry it open. Tobias reluctantly accepted the help while Bridget looked on in fear. What is it? She asked. Jerry answered. It's an IED with a targeted C4 blast. Tobias opened the device. The two of them began speaking bomb jargon like they were talking shop. There's a panel to enter a disarm code. Jerry pointed. Watch out for the mercury tilt switch. If we jostle it, the bomb will go off. I can disarm this. I just need to disconnect the arming switch from the power source. Are you mental? What kind of bomb has a tilt switch and not an interrupter detector? You disconnect that wire, you set it off. Nathaniel continued to bleed and bubble unintelligibly. A hand grabbed my shoulder and pulled me away from the bomb experts. It was Lauren, directing me to a corner where she and Claire had been building a small fortress of books. We're making a bunker, she explained. I can't leave them, I said, pointing at the chair with the bomb trio. You can't help them either, help us. She had a point, and I didn't have time to argue. If that bomb got down to 1 minute, I'd have to find a way to subdue Jerry and drag him over to the safety corner. Until then, at least, I could do something productive. Nathaniel continued to drone and bleed. Jerry and Tobias argued about explosive schematics. Bridget tried to remain calm, and the rest of us built a blast wall in the furthest corner of the room out of the thickest books we could find. The wall was only about chest high when I heard Jerry scream, "No!" Tobias screamed back. I know what I'm doing. He shoved Jerry away, reached into the bomb casing, and... Lauren slammed an open hardcover book over my head and pulled me to the ground. The room turned solid white, and the air around me was replaced by pure sound. Time wavered. I floated. Reality coalesced. Eons passed, and then I was brought violently back to the moment. Everything hurt. My insides revolted. Air, mercifully, returned, but breathing was a laborious task. I tasted copper. I couldn't see anything. The only sound was the ringing in my ears. And then, what was left of my survival instinct took over. I tried to move my fingers. So far, so good. Then my arms. Not so good. I yelled out Jerry's name and realized that it was muffled. Not just by the ringing. There was something in front of my face. On top of me. All over my body, holding me down. Oh no, I realized. I'm buried alive. I struggled to free myself, finding that the grave of books that I'd fallen into wasn't all that deep. I pushed the debris off of myself and emerged into a dark room. The only light was coming from the myriad of fires that were pouring in through the secret passageway where the bookshelf door had been blown right off its hinges. Most of the room was gone, or at least hadn't landed yet. There was a small crater in the center of the room where Bridget's chair had been. Lauren and Claire were both up, coughing, covered in burns and blood, but alive. And then I saw the bodies. I almost didn't recognize them from what was left, but there was no doubt. Bridget, Tobias, and Jerry were completely destroyed. My vision had come true. We couldn't have saved them. They were all dead. Part 6. The only saving grace was that I didn't have adequate time to process my grief. If I had, it may have completely gotten the better of me. But it was in a matter of seconds that we were on the move. We put out the fires, covered the bodies, and went into the lobby to find Wolfgang standing there, waiting. He looked us up and down and said, "What happened?" He tried to keep it covered with his jacket, but I noticed the gun in his waistband immediately. "Where are you?" Lauren asked. "I don't know," he lied. A coughing fit got the better of Claire, and she fell to the corner, trying to catch her breath. Instead of rushing to her sister's side, Lauren turned to me. I knew what was coming, and didn't particularly care for it. "Save it," I said. "I'm okay." Of course, I wasn't okay, but the time was essence here, and the last thing that I needed to hear was the reciting of the same platitudes Tobias had given Wolfgang only minutes earlier, after his mother had died. The words would have rang just as hollow now as they had then. Wolfgang came to the bottom of the stairs, took a look at the damage in the room behind us, and asked, "Is there anyone else left?" What he meant to say was, "Is there anyone else left alive? Anyone else to worry about stopping me?" He was too inexperienced to be subtle. Even without Claire's ability of amplifying my senses, I would have known. Nathaniel may have been dead, but as long as Wolfgang was armed, we weren't out of the woods yet. I went for the safe answer. "We don't know. There's probably more people here." He pointed at the destruction. "Who all was in there?" I stepped closer. His hand gravitated uncomfortably close to the hidden weapon. "We don't know," I said. Wolfgang cocked his head at me, no doubt wondering if I suspected him. But how could he have ever guessed that I knew exactly what he was thinking? I still didn't understand it myself, these thoughts appearing randomly in my mind. It has been a while since I took my medicine. "What are we going to do now?" he asked. "I have a plan," I answered. Then, on the fly, I made up a plan. "We need to split up. The girls will stay here and search for survivors. You and I will get to my car and bring it around." "I thought you said your car broke down." "It did. I have everything I need to fix it now." "That's it. Tell him whatever you need to. Just get him away from the others." Lauren put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Jack." I turned to her. "This is the best idea." Then I looked past her to Claire. "Isn't that right?" Claire nodded in agreement. That wasn't enough for Lauren. "Be careful," Claire said, without moving her lips or using her voice. I turned back to Wolfgang. "Let's go. We don't have much time." He flashed a grin. "After you." The rain was chilling to the bone. We were both drenched in no time. The stinging wind and water lit up every fresh burn on my face and hands. The storm quickly washed the blood and bits from my hair. The solid pieces, I realized with disgust, were splinters of bone fragments. I wanted to puke, but I held myself together. I needed to keep my wits about me and watch for the right opportunity to turn the tables. But Wolfgang was patient and calculating. He followed closely, never coming within arm's reach. We used our phone's flashlights to cut through the dark. If I got lucky, my baseball bat might save the day. But as we continued, I became aware of certain curious matters. There seemed to be far more trees than I remember seeing on our walk up here, and the road felt much thinner. Where we walked might be barely considered enough space for a one-way, and our walk didn't include any sort of decline. Weren't we supposed to be going downhill? There was a sound. I shined my light on the nearest tree. For a moment, it looked like something had skittered off into the branches, but whatever it was might have been the least of our concerns. We were nearly a mile into the trip before Wolfgang finally spoke up. "You know, you look pretty awful. Considering that I'd just been blown up and lost my best friend and was probably going to die, his assessment could have been a lot worse." And all I could say was, "All right." I didn't recognize anything around us. It was impossible that we'd gotten lost on the only road, and yet, being impossible hardly seemed to stop anything else from happening tonight. The only thing I could do was chalk it up to my memory playing tricks on me again. How long has it been since I took my medicine? It must have been another mile down the road before Wolfgang spoke again. "How far away do you think we'd have to be to not hear a gunshot from the house?" You could shoot someone dead at the end of the driveway and nobody would be the wiser. But I sure as hell wasn't about to tell him that. "Don't worry, gunshots are loud as hell. If someone were to fire a gun, everyone would know." I kept pushing forward. The trees were so thick on either side of us, they looked like a solid wall in the dark. That's not right, I thought to myself. I remember this was farmland before. How much further? Wolfgang whined. I'm not sure. The car should be around here somewhere. I scanned the edges of the road for a stick or rock or anything. I could feel it. He'd lost his patience. He was getting ready to take a shot, and I didn't have anything to defend myself. I don't think we walked this far, he said. I think someone must have moved all the cars. Who would do something like that? I don't know, but it makes sense. I stopped, turned to face him, and asked, how does that make sense? Think about it. Whoever's doing this has it down to a pattern. They must have a lot of practice. They probably have friends or workers who wait until we leave and then they come out and drive our cars to a scrapyard. They're good at this because they've done this so many times before. You're right, it makes sense, I said, even though it didn't really. I've got to say, you don't seem all that worried. I've got a plan. Yeah? Yeah. When they come for me, I'll just kill them all. I turned around and started walking again. Hey, let's keep looking. Maybe our cars are just a little further this way. I put some pep in my step, trying to create some distance between us. But Wolfgang was faster than me, and he kept up without a problem. You know what? He said. I think that's the secret ingredient. Practice. You just need a little bit of practice and you can do anything you want. There was something up ahead, an interruption in the pattern, a driveway. For a moment, I thought I was safe. Wolfgang hadn't noticed yet. He just kept talking. That's what Mom always told me. She said that I needed real-world experience, and I could go wherever I wanted. As I got closer, I realized what was wrong with this driveway. I'd seen it before. You know why my mom left her room and that man told us to stay still? She wanted us to sneak away before the cops arrived. And you know what? 'Cause she thought I was the one who killed old Maggie. Mom thought that she was protecting me, but really, she was just controlling me. And then I saw my opportunity, and you know what I did? I took my knife and... Wolfgang! I shouted. He was grinning, holding the gun in his hand, eager to get more practice. What? I pointed up the driveway. He was so hyper-focused that he failed to realize where we were. We'd been walking for miles in a straight line, yet somehow we were standing back where we started, at the entrance of Bedside Manor. He laughed. What's so funny? I asked. It doesn't matter, he said. I'm still gonna kill you. Then I'm gonna kill the sisters. Then I'm gonna kill everyone who tries to mess with me. And when the cops arrive, I'll tell them. My cell phone collided with his face as hard as I could throw it. I might have just made an incredible baseball player, but in this one, I was taking advantage of a young psychopath's inexperience in blindly running towards the forest for cover. A second later, though, he let out a primal howl. The light from his phone cast my shrinking shadow against the trees, giving me just enough visual reference to slide between two giant trunks as the first shots rang out. He screamed again and rushed after me, firing wildly, with no regard for ammo conservation. His light was the only source out there. The further I got, the harder it was to see. I tripped a few times, hit a few branches, then finally stopped, pushed myself against the closest tree, and held my breath. He was still broadcasting his position like a total amateur, screaming, firing, but he obviously had no idea where I had gone. I started to climb. The kid would never find me up there. Another shot rang out, much closer, and then I saw the light, steadily growing brighter. Wolfgang was headed straight for me, but he couldn't have known where I was, right? He didn't see me climb, did he? I had the upper hand as long as I stayed still and didn't move. I mean, it's not like he was a psychic too, right? Oh no, is he psychic too? He stepped into the clearing beneath my hiding tree and stopped. Hey, Jack, he called. If you come out now, I promise I'll put a bullet right in your brain. I know how to make it fast. I was gauging the possibility of a surprise drop attack when I heard the noise, a low, rumbling growl emanating from somewhere deeper in the forest. Wolfgang snapped his light in that direction. Jack, he said, is that you? The growl became louder, and then it split into multiples, a chorus of thunderous growls from every direction. He swung the gun and light in a full circle, then called out, "Hey, who's there?" The circle of sound began to shrink on us, became louder, closer. When the first creature appeared, it took all of my self-control not to scream. The thing was nearly as tall as Wolfgang. Bright, red eyes, coal-black fur, 4 legs, hackles raised, teeth bared. A nightmare hellhound, steadily closing in on its prey. Wolfgang fired. The bullet landed in the animal's snout, but just like Nathaniel, the animal had no reaction to the injury. "Stay back!" Wolfgang screamed. I noticed the other hellhounds a second before he did. There were 4 of them now, boxing him in from every side. He spun and fired at another, catching it across the torso, but the monster didn't so much as yipe. He didn't get a third shot. The animals attacked all at once, tearing into him, ripping him flesh from bone as he screamed. I closed my eyes. If I could have, I would have closed my ears too, but I had to listen to him wail as they devoured and dragged him off into the woods. Sometime later, it's hard to say how much time, but I was reasonably certain that I was already in the early to mid stages of hypothermia. I reopened my eyes. Much to my amazement, I could see my surroundings. The sun was already rising. Even though the storm clouds continued to blot out the sky, enough light broke free to allow me to navigate back. I needed to get Claire and Lauren before they made a mistake of coming out and looking for me. The rules of the game had, quite unexpectedly, changed again, and now there was pertinent information that needed to be factored into our survival plan. Wolfgang had been killed by I literally rolled my eyes as the thought hit me. Wolfgang was killed by a gang of wolves. After carefully falling into a tree and onto my butt, I righted myself and started back towards the house. I took 2 steps, then stopped and wondered, is this the right direction? I turned around and tried to remember which way I was running before I climbed the tree. In the panic of it all, I'd forgotten to take visual references. Not that it really mattered, considering how every tree I looked at was exactly the same. I heard the growl just in time to turn to see the black wolves standing a couple of yards away. Somehow, it looked even more terrifying in the daytime. Eyes glowing red as hot embers, fur blacker than night, teeth full on display. "Hey, buddy," I said in the calmest voice. "Look at you. Who's a good boy? You are. Thanks for the assistance back there. You, should be full by now, right?" I hit the ground before I realized he'd even pounced. I felt the full weight of the enormous creature pinning me down. I felt my ribs cracking like pretzels beneath his paws, stabbing my organs from the inside. The very last thing I felt was the searing, brutal pain of its teeth, dull but strong, as they pinched around my throat. I couldn't scream. I couldn't fight. "Don't touch that!" Jerry screamed. There was a lot of screaming, actually, but Jerry's was the only voice that I could make out. The lights had snapped back on. The warmth had returned to my skin. The ringing in my ears from the blast had gone away. We were all seated around the dining room table. We were all perfectly dry. Everyone was back in their period costumes. No cuts, scrapes, or bruises. Everything was, dare I say, normal. Tobias and Bridget jumped to their feet and embraced. Hope vomited onto her dinner plate. Wolfgang stared across the table at me, fury in his eyes. The voices continued over one another, fighting, screaming. Eventually, Jerry whistled out loud enough to make everyone shut up. He had the floor now. "Everybody calm your collective selves and let me ask you one question. Did I just die?" "You died over an hour ago," Lauren said. Jerry put his hands on his hips, gave Tobias a sassy look, and laughed. "I told you so." "You didn't die an hour ago," I corrected her. "You died last night. You've been dead for so long." He looked at me, made a bemused face, and asked, "Are you crying, dude?" I can't tell why he would ask me something like that. I mean, I wasn't crying, and anybody who tries to tell you otherwise wasn't there and can't know really what happened and is probably a big fat liar. Now everyone. There was an audible gasp from several of us present as soon as Nathaniel began speaking. It would appear that our night has gotten off to a strange start. Fortunately, we have been given a second opportunity to solve the mystery of Bedside Manor. I recommend we do not squander it. Jerry picked up a dinner plate and frisbeed it across the table. It smashed into pieces across Nathaniel's face, but the old man didn't react. Damn, Jerry said. I thought for sure that would prove he wasn't really blind. I think that proves he isn't really human, corrected Lauren. Hope slapped the table with both of her hands and screamed, Will somebody please tell me what is going on? Tobias asked, What's the last thing everyone remembers? Jerry answered first. You didn't listen to me and got us killed. Lauren was next. We survived the explosion, but then Jack and Wolfgang left to find help, and then she couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence, so Claire did it for her. We were killed by a haunted suit of armor. Jerry nodded and said, Nice. What about you? Tobias asked, looking at Hope. The color drained from her face as she turned and looked at her son. She answered, I didn't see who did it. Wolfgang pointed across the table at me and shouted, He did it! He's the one who killed me! Jerry couldn't contain himself. Oh, shut your butt, Wolfie. We're not idiots. We know you killed your mom. Don't speak to my son that way, Hope shrieked. Your friend there is the one taking crazy pills. I snapped right back. And you're the lady who recognizes antipsychotics by their drug names. Care to tell us why that is? Tobias was kind enough to change the subject. Everybody hold on a second. Am I to understand that we all just experienced our own deaths? And then we regained consciousness right here at the same time with no signs of injury whatsoever? Huh, Jerry responded. He looked around the table and asked, Hey, how come Maggie isn't here? Was there not enough fairy dust to bring everyone back? Maybe it's just a collective vision, Lauren offered. Maybe none of that really happened? I mean, how could it have? The sound of a loud chime echoed through the house. The hell was that? Jerry asked. Nathaniel answered with a smile. Ah, goody. It seems the detective has finally arrived. Perhaps he can help us sort out this ghastly affair. Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Did you like today's story? It was written by Jack Townsend, and in the description below, you'll find more stories by him that you can purchase. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Consider sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and don't let the shadows get too close.